Imagine a lizard that outsmarts traps, devours turtle nests at a rate of 97% destruction, and spreads faster than the Burmese python. A lizard that grows as big as a medium-sized dog, remembers escape routes, and can survive freezing winters by burrowing underground. This isn't science fiction. This is happening right now across the southeastern United States, and if scientists are right, by the early 2030s this invader could dominate a third of America. Before we dive in, if you're fascinated by wildlife invasions, environmental crises, and the battle to save native species, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're about to explore one of the most alarming ecological disasters unfolding in real time, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Florida has seen its share of invasive species. Burmese pythons, lionfish, giant African land snails, the list goes on. But there's a new player in town that's causing scientists to lose sleep, and it's not getting nearly the attention it deserves. Meet the Argentine black and white tegu, a South American lizard that's tearing through ecosystems with devastating efficiency. Here's the thing that makes this invasion so terrifying. In just 5 years, the tegu population has exploded by 250%. Let me repeat that. 250% growth in 5 years. We're talking about a species that went from isolated sightings to establishing breeding populations across at least 6 states. In some counties, there are more tegus than people. Think about that for a second. A small Georgia county with about 2,000 human residents now has over 3,000 of these lizards crawling through yards, crossing roads in broad daylight, and dismantling the local ecosystem piece by piece. But before we get into the devastation they're causing, you need to understand what makes these creatures so uniquely dangerous. This isn't your average backyard lizard. The Argentine tegu can reach up to 4.5 feet in length and weigh over 10 pounds. Imagine encountering one of these in your backyard. They've got thick, muscular bodies, powerful jaws that can deliver a bite force of 200 pounds per square inch, sharp claws, and tail they can use as a weapon. They're built like tanks, and they move with surprising speed and agility. What really sets them apart is their intelligence. We're not talking about a mindless reptile operating purely on instinct. Studies have found that tegus exhibit rapid eye movement sleep, that's REM sleep, something previously observed mainly in mammals and birds. This type of sleep is linked to memory processing and learning, and the tegus use that brain power to devastating effect. Researchers at the University of Tennessee discovered that tegus recognize colors and objects 2 to 3 times faster than box turtles and rattlesnakes, species already considered intelligent among reptiles. In practical terms, this means tegus learn to avoid traps after just 1 or 2 encounters. They remember escape routes. They figure out how to open simple latches on chicken coops. Farmers report setting traps one day only to find the lizards taking completely different routes the next day, as if they've mapped out the danger zones and adjusted accordingly. There are even reports of tegus traveling along hot asphalt roads at night to cover distances of tens of kilometers, behavior more commonly associated with mammals like foxes and coyotes. These are problem-solving reptiles that adapt to human environments with frightening speed. And then there's their diet. Tegus are opportunistic omnivores, which is a polite way of saying they'll eat absolutely anything they can get their claws on. Turtle eggs, bird eggs, alligator eggs, poisonous frogs, small mammals, fruits, vegetables, carrion, you name it. But it's their appetite for eggs that makes them an ecological nightmare. An adult tegu can wipe out up to 20 nests per year. In Florida, researchers have documented destruction rates of 70 to 97% of turtle nests in a single breeding season. 97%. Think about what that means for species that are already struggling. Sea turtles, for instance, can take 20 to 30 years to reach sexual maturity. A single tegu can consume an entire nest, eggs and all, in minutes. You're looking at generations of turtles that will never exist because of these invaders. The impact goes beyond turtles. Tegus have been caught eating gopher tortoise hatchlings, a threatened species in Florida. They raid the nests of ground nesting birds like quail, blue jays, and the endangered burrowing owl. In some areas, quail and blue jay populations have declined by 40 to 60% since the tegus arrived. When you combine this with the devastation caused by Burmese pythons, which target larger prey, you get what ecologists call scissor effect. The pythons eliminate adult animals, the tegus destroy the eggs and young, and the ecosystem loses its ability to recover. It's a 1-2 punch that native species simply can't survive. But the damage doesn't stop with predation. Tegus are also ecosystem engineers in the worst possible way. They dig burrows up to 6 feet deep, which destabilizes riverbanks, cuts through plant roots, and creates shelters that attract rodents. This displacement of rodents increases the risk of disease transmission and creates cascading effects throughout the food web. They're not just eating their way through the ecosystem, they're physically dismantling it from the ground up. Now here's where things get even more alarming. Most reptiles are ectothermic, meaning they rely entirely on external heat sources to regulate their body temperature. Cold weather should stop them in their tracks. But tegus have a secret weapon. During breeding season, they become partially endothermic, meaning they can raise their internal body temperature by 5 to 10 degrees Celsius above the ambient temperature. This is incredibly rare in reptiles and gives them a massive advantage. This ability accelerates egg development, allowing tegu offspring to hatch 7 to 14 days earlier than they otherwise would. Faster reproduction means exponential population growth. And it gets worse. Tegus have been confirmed to survive winters in Georgia and South Carolina, even with temperatures near freezing. They do this by brumate, that's the reptile equivalent of hibernation, for 40 to 100 days, digging burrows 1 to 2 meters deep to retain heat and avoid freezing. Scientists at Auburn University conducted a study where they relocated tegus from southern Florida to Alabama, over 900 kilometers northwest of their capture location, and exposed them to freezing winter conditions. 9 out of 12 lizards emerged from winter dormancy. 7 survived more than a year. Think about what this means. If tegus can survive Alabama winters, they can potentially establish populations much further north than anyone initially thought possible. The United States Geological Survey and the USDA have run climate models predicting where tegus could spread. The results are terrifying. By the 2030s, tegus could potentially inhabit as much as a third of the United States, stretching from Florida all the way to Texas, reaching as far north as Tennessee, and even crossing borders into Mexico and Central America. We're not talking about isolated populations anymore. We're talking about a continental-scale invasion. So how did we get here? How did a South American lizard end up running wild across the southeastern United States? The answer, unsurprisingly, is the exotic pet trade. Between 2000 and 2015, the United States imported up to 79,000 live tegus, and that's not counting the ones bred domestically. Baby tegus are cheap and cute, costing anywhere from $50 to $150. The problem is they grow fast. A 15-centimeter hatchling can reach over a meter in length in less than a year. Suddenly, that adorable little lizard is a 4-foot-long, 10-pound eating machine that requires specialized care and a lot of space. Many owners, unprepared for the reality of keeping a large, intelligent reptile, simply release them into the wild. After the pandemic, Rescue centers in Florida reported hundreds of abandoned tegus every month. And it's not just individual pet owners. Commercial breeding facilities in Florida, which are a central part of the reptile trade in the country, have experienced mass escapes following hurricanes and floods, particularly between 2017 and 2020. When facilities flood, enclosures rupture, and hundreds of adult tegus, already adapted to hot and humid environments, escape into the wild. The math here is brutal. Just 10 female tegus escaping in the same area, each laying 20 to 34 eggs per year, can create a population in the thousands within 5 years. And that's exactly what happened. In Tattnall County, Georgia, which locals have started calling Tegu Town, the invasion has become impossible to ignore. This is a rural county with about 2,000 human residents. Since 2021, authorities have recorded over 3,000 tegus within just a 5-kilometer radius. Residents describe seeing tegus sunbathing in their front yards, crossing roads at midday without fear, behaving like stray dogs. The lizards have become part of daily life, and there's almost nothing anyone can do about it. Part of the reason tegus thrive so easily is the absence of natural predators. American alligators occasionally eat juvenile tegus, but these instances are rare. Coyotes struggle to take down adults because of their thick skin and quick reflexes. Eagles might snatch up a young tegu here and there, but the impact is negligible. Without predator pressure, tegu reproduction becomes a well-oiled machine pumping out thousands of offspring every season. Controlling an invasive species this intelligent and adaptable is extraordinarily difficult. Authorities rely on public reports to locate individuals, then deploy traps, use infrared drones to scan dense vegetation, and send out teams with dogs trained to track the lizards by scent. But tegus have learned to outsmart the system. There are documented cases of tegus releasing their tails during a chase. The severed tail continues to move and retain scent, throwing tracking teams off course for hundreds of meters while the lizard escapes. It's a defense mechanism that's devastatingly effective against modern tracking methods. The most common control method involves live traps baited with chicken eggs. The University of Florida deploys 300 of these traps annually in and around the Everglades. But even this faces obstacles. In 1 year alone, 53 traps were either stolen or dragged away by alligators. When a tegu is caught, it has to be placed in 2 tightly sealed bags and locked in a rigid container with 2 padlocks, because there have been cases of tegus chewing through bags or forcing open lids with their powerful limbs. Researchers have also begun experimenting with AI-powered smart traps. These traps use cameras equipped with artificial intelligence to identify tegus as they enter. When the AI confirms a tegu is inside, it triggers the door to close automatically and sends a notification to wildlife managers. Early field tests showed that smart traps capture more tegus while requiring far fewer resources compared to traditional traps. This technology could be a game changer, but it's still in the experimental phase and far from widespread deployment. In 2020, the United States Geological Survey recorded the capture of over 900 individual tegus, the largest number on record. Graphs showed a decline in the central population, but scientists stress that this reduction is fragile and far from representing real control. Since 2009, Florida alone has removed over 10,000 tegus from the wild. Private trappers have caught hundreds more, with some reporting over 400 captures in a single year. And yet, the population continues to grow. It's estimated that the United States spends over $10 million a year fighting this invasion. That includes drones, tracking dogs, field personnel, transportation, legal proceedings, and public awareness campaigns. $10 million, and the lizards are still winning. In response to the crisis, Florida and Georgia have passed laws allowing landowners to humanely kill tegus on private property without a permit. However, this creates a legal gray area because animal cruelty laws and local regulations still apply. The result is a confusing patchwork of rules that makes it difficult for ordinary citizens to know what they can and can't do. Florida has also implemented a prohibition on owning tegus. As of April 2021, residents cannot purchase tegus or breed them within the state. People who already owned tegus before the ban were required to register and microchip their animals. Breeders had until June 2024 to phase out operations. But these laws only affect the future. They do nothing to undo the damage from the thousands of tegus that escaped over the past 10 to 20 years. Several states have introduced amnesty programs for exotic pets, allowing owners to surrender animals without penalty. The hope is that this will reduce the number of tegus being released into the wild. But again, this only works if people participate, and many don't. The ecological consequences of inaction are staggering. If tegus continue to spread unchecked, we could see the localized extinction of native species. Sea turtle populations in Florida are already under pressure from coastal development, climate change, and plastic pollution. Add in the loss of tens of thousands of nests per season to tegu predation, and recovery becomes impossible. The gopher tortoise, a keystone species in upland ecosystems, is particularly vulnerable. These tortoises create burrows that over 300 other species rely on for shelter. When tegus eat gopher tortoise hatchlings and eggs, they're not just impacting one species, they're destabilizing an entire ecological network. Ground nesting birds face a similar crisis. Species like the burrowing owl and the Cape sable seaside sparrow are already endangered. Tegus raiding their nests could push them over the edge into extinction. And because tegus are so prolific and adaptable, traditional conservation methods like habitat protection won't be enough. You can't protect a nest from a predator that can outsmart your defenses. In the Everglades, the situation is particularly dire. This is one of the most unique and biodiverse ecosystems in North America, and it's already under siege from Burmese pythons, which have decimated mammal populations. The arrival of tegus adds another layer of destruction. Pythons kill the adults, tegus destroy the eggs, and the ecosystem collapses from both ends. Restoration efforts in the Everglades, which have cost hundreds of millions of dollars and decades of work, are now threatened by these invasions. It's hard to restore an ecosystem when invasive species are actively tearing it apart faster than you can rebuild it. So what happens next? If current trends continue, ecologists predict that by the early 2030s, tegus could expand their range dramatically. Climate models suggest they could thrive across the southeastern United States, from Florida to Texas, and potentially as far north as Tennessee. Some models even suggest they could cross into Mexico and Central America, where warm climates and abundant food sources would allow them to establish new populations. At that point, containment becomes impossible. You're no longer fighting isolated populations, you're fighting a species that has become permanently embedded in multiple ecosystems across an entire region. The cost of management would skyrocket, and the ecological damage would be irreversible. Scientists are exploring new strategies to combat the invasion. One promising approach involves using pheromone traps to attract entire groups of tegus, not just individuals. Researchers are also studying tegu reproductive biology to identify vulnerabilities that could be exploited for population control. For instance, targeting female tegus could be more effective than indiscriminate removal, since female reproduction is the limiting factor in population growth. Another avenue being explored is the use of drones equipped with thermal imaging to locate tegu burrows during brumation, when the lizards are dormant and easier to capture. Ground robots and automated traps are also being developed, though these technologies are still years away from practical deployment. Some scientists have proposed introducing biological control agents, such as parasites or diseases that specifically target tegus, but this approach is controversial and carries significant risks. Introducing a new species to control an invasive one can backfire spectacularly, creating yet another ecological problem. The reality is, there's no silver bullet. Controlling an invasive species as intelligent, adaptable, and prolific as the tegu requires a multi-pronged approach involving trapping, public education, habitat management, and cutting-edge technology. It requires sustained funding and political will, neither of which are guaranteed. The tegu invasion is a case study in how quickly things can spiral out of control. A few escaped pets, a handful of breeding events, and suddenly you have thousands of lizards reshaping an entire ecosystem. It's a reminder that our actions have consequences, and those consequences can be devastating. For the people living in tegu-invaded areas, the reality is already here. They see these lizards in their yards, on their porches, crossing their streets. They watch as native wildlife disappears and ecosystems crumble. And they wonder if anyone is doing enough to stop it. The truth is, we're at a critical juncture. The next few years will determine whether tegus become a manageable problem or an unstoppable force. Scientists are doing everything they can with the resources they have, but they need more support. More funding, more public awareness, more political action. If we fail to act now, the tegu could become the next Burmese python, a permanent fixture of the landscape that we have to live with because eradication is no longer possible. And if that happens, the ecological cost will be measured not just in dollars, but in the extinction of species that have called these lands home for millions of years. So the question isn't just whether we can stop the tegu. The question is whether we will. And the clock is ticking.